Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Issues of the Heart podcast. I'm your host, Brother Kobe.
And I'm Rogers.
All right, we have a very special episode and topic for you today. We're looking at, why go to church? In this day and media age and with the World Wide Web, many people are, exploring, online church, servicing online. Why need I go outside of the comfort of my own home to go to a place I can worship by myself? So what role and function does the church play in? Do we have a biblical precedence for uniting and coming together with like-minded people and fellowship? So, what does the Bible say? We want to examine that and look at that today. And so, in this kind of series, I'm going to defer. So I want to set that precedent, but, Pastor, I want to see what are your thoughts as we sitting here all cozy by the fireplace, you know, what are your thoughts? What does the Bible say about going to worship?
So there's always the ideal, and then there's the reality of present circumstances, what we face, what we deal with. And first and foremost, we want to recognize that God has law, He has rules, He has order, He has structure. And so we're very thankful for that. And always want to strive to understand what that is. Then secondly, we also are comforted by the fact that God understands and knows our frame. He knows that we're but dust. And in doing so, then He recognizes that in every place, every culture, there are different circumstances that He still works with and is still gracious unto us. So to answer the first part of the question in terms of what's the Bible order, what does the scripture really talk about in terms of order, and even how we should adopt and adjust and modify or adjust in a digital age. First, I'll remind us of Hebrews chapter 10 and verse 25. And that says, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together as a manner of some is, but exhorting one another, and so much the more so as you see the day approaching. So there's a value certainly that comes from being able to fellowship together, being able to be, and that's in person, certainly, to be able to be together in person, fellowshipping. And so that's like the best perfect atmosphere where on a weekly basis or as often as possible, the disciples, according to Acts chapter 2, they would break bread daily, one with another, fellowshipping. In the book of Acts chapter 2, we see that carried throughout. So there's always that benefit that's there. And what do we get from it? Well, we can, the fellowship of singing, sharing our testimonies, praising God, worshiping, being able to lift each other up, encouraging one another. And those are things that, yes, they can take place outside of the confines of a building. And we recognize that a building is not really what makes the worship experience sacred, because God is not confined to a building. But yet He makes His presence known, certainly when there are places dedicated to His honor, dedicated for His service. And then those are places that are non-official as such. Maybe it's a home or a gathering and so forth. So He makes His presence known in that way. So again, ideally, we have a place, and it's important not for the earth as such for the benefit of God, but it's for our benefit. When we are joined into the body, then we have people that we are accountable to, responsible for. And so we're fighting in a spiritual battle. And if I don't have anyone to be able to lean upon for support, for strength, for encouragement, for admonition, for rebuke as well. And that's one of the other things that sometimes we overlook. One of the benefits comes from rebuke. When I'm in a body, there are other people there who, if they see me going astray, can chastise me. If I'm on my own, then I have no one to be able to chastise me. And so the book of Ecclesiastes talks about when two people, the benefit of being there, that if one falls down, the other one can lift them up and so forth. And those things, they certainly play out in the context and the confines of a church, being a part of a body. The second piece then, in reference to like a digital space, look, we've all been impacted by COVID. And there's some people who look at the initial restrictions and the mandates that came down and said, well, look, that's the government saying that they don't want to have us in church organization and so forth. And we've talked extensively about that. That's not the case at all. It's not an emphasis of Revelation 13. In fact, in the Old Testament and the New Testament, there were different mandates that were there where people had sicknesses and viruses just to avoid spreading them. So those communicable diseases, God was trying to keep a lid on it. So we are certainly in a digital age. And so there's a benefit in that respect, and even in any instance of being able to connect digitally on the TV. TV came into existence, radio came into existence But those I feel should be not the primary method that is there. So ideally, if I can find a place to be able to fellowship in, then to be able to do so, because again, those brings those other layers there that I'm able to receive and able to impart. But then there's situations in which maybe I have checked. I know when my family and I we moved down to Southern Cal a couple of maybe 10 years ago. Initially, we checked different places, went to different churches to see where's a place that we'll be able to fellowship. And if we didn't find a place, I know that what our ultimate result would have been, that would have been that we'd have had to done something, online, or being able to watch or participate that way. Again, maybe not the ideal, but that would only be from the effort of being put forth of not being able to find a place that really resonated and spoke to our hearts and minds and fed our souls. But then if we didn't find a place, then it wasn't just going to be what we're just going to, be in the house as such, shut away, but we'll try to still connect in whatever way we could. So I think, again, in our experience, the ideal was us find a place to be able to meet and worship. The less than ideal was that we'll have to find a place where we can fellowship and be able to join, whether it's through online or, and at that time, of course, you weren't doing Zoom. It wasn't anything that we see in terms of like Facebook and services, attending and so forth. It was just maybe people posting or putting up afterwards, et cetera. But then, of course, the third place is that you still have worship in your home. So that's how I see it in those three phases, moving from maybe what is the ideal, but in every one, recognizing again that hey, God will be just as near you in that particular situation as he would be in the other one, but we strive for the ideal.
Yeah. What's interesting about one of the things, and we're gonna go to this and I'm gonna try to follow an historical train of thought. But there's a reason why when you look at, even in the animal kingdom, they travel in packs because they understand if I get caught out. I've seen enough nature videos that when you break from that pack and you get out there by yourself, there's wolves or different animals of prey that they look for that lone one, right? You want to stay within the fold, within the pack, because if I catch you out here by yourself, I catch you out here slipping away from the pack, I'm on you, right? And the Bible talks about the devil as a roaring lion, walking about seeking whom he may devour. So he's looking for those individuals that have strayed from the folds. There's a reason why the shepherd goes out and leaves the 99 and goes to that one, because he understands the danger of the one that gets out there by his lonely, right? Not being able to find his way back to the fold, and there's other dangers that are out there. However, going back to the beginning, just leaving the concept of church. Now we understand that the term church is, when it's used in the Bible, it's not talking about per se a building. Now we kind of use that term today as in some artificial construct of organization and building. However, when the Bible uses it, he's talking about people that are called out from the world by the mighty cleaver of truth. And so those who have embraced the truth have received Jesus and have separated themselves from the elements of the world that are against him, and they come together in fellowship and worshiping God. Now, looking at this from the very beginning, we know that God has established an order of worship where his people will come together and worship him. And we're not just talking about on a weekly thing, but even on a consistent basis. And when you follow the Bible, one of the things that's prevalent is altars. It's interesting that the Bible tells us and shows us, if we paid attention to this part, that Abraham, everywhere he went, the Bible talked about how he would set up these altars of worship, but not just he himself alone, but the tribe. That people think it was Abraham and Sarai and a few servants. No, Abraham had hundreds of people. He had enough people to go to war with nations. Okay. So Abraham wasn't by himself, so he had a whole tribe of people that they would come together in corporate worship, worshiping the same God. However, we have to remember at the same time that we just talked about this, Melchizedek. It was a person named Melchizedek. And not only was he king of Salem, right, but he was also priest of the Most High God. Now, you can't be a priest and you minister unto yourself, right? So he had a nation of people whom he presided as priests over. So you had this concept of congregation, people that's coming out to worshiping the one true God. And so you see this concept all throughout the Old Testament of even Jacob building these altars of worship towards God. And this is where they would congregate to have fellowship and worship. Now, moving even further along, now it says this in the New Testament. It talks about Moses. No, Stephen said this, but he talked about how Moses in Acts chapter 7, he talked about because the word church is not in the Old Testament, but he called it the church in the wilderness. The church in the wilderness. Now, it's this concept where people feel like, hey, I can be here and God comes to me. I don't have to go out to some place of worship. God comes to where I am. Now, it's interesting that the Bible says in Exodus chapter 25 and verse 8, he says, let them make me a sanctuary that I may dwell among them, right? And so it was this concept that God began to instill in Israel that, yes, you can worship God in your individual homes, but God set up designated times for the people to come to him to worship him corporately, right? So look at this in the book of, and I'm not going to read a lot, but I want to just establish the principle. Exodus chapter 29, beginning in verse 42, and I'm going to read verse 43 as well. It says, and this shall be a continual burnt offering throughout your generations at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation before the Lord, where I will meet with you to speak unto you, and there I will meet with the children of Israel, and the tabernacle shall be sanctified by my glory. And so God said, listen, I have set up this meeting place, and wherever the people are, they had to leave the comfort of their homes to come out and meet God here. God wasn't saying, I'm coming to where you are, now he said, let them make a sanctuary that I may dwell among them, but everybody didn't live at the sanctuary. So they had to come to where he was for this corporate worship. So that was established throughout the whole Old Testament. Even David said, I was glad when they said unto me, let us go up to worship in the courts of the Lord. So he even established this principle of leaving where you are to go where God is to worship him corporately. And so it's a concept that's throughout the whole Old Testament. So it's not a new concept. When you look then in the New Testament, we like to say that Jesus is our example. You see, the Bible says about Jesus in Luke chapter 4, verse 16, that as his custom was, that he went into the synagogues to worship, right? Now we'll always use that text for a different reason, but we see it was the established habit and principle of Christ that he would go out and worship God at the designated place at the designated time. Now you have to understand, because it was a point in time where Jesus would go to church and be persecuted. They give him strange looks. They would talk about him. They would say different things. They even tried to kill him. They just tried to throw him, ran him out the church, tried to throw him off a cliff. Yet he's still going. He didn't use that to say, because they did this to me, now I'm not going to worship God in this capacity. I'm just going to worship at home. I'm going to worship at different, in the wilderness or whatever place. He said when they had him at his trial, he said, y'all coming out like, with sticks and staves, like you're coming out against a thief. I was daily with you in the temple. So this is where he went to a place of worship. Now we have to understand this as well, that there was periods of time. Remember in the time of Samuel and his mother Hannah, and you had what's his name was the priest? Eli was the priest. He had two wicked sons, Hophni and Phinehas. They were wicked and they were doing wicked things. And a lot of the people of God were discouraged from going to that temple to worship because of their wickedness. And so they would worship at home. They wouldn't go there because the things that was going on there. You had the time of Ahab, the king, where temple worship was suspended for a time. And in the book of Isaiah, God said, I will be a sanctuary for you, because the people couldn't go to the temple to worship. So God says, listen, I will come to where you are. When in Ezekiel, chapter 11 and verse 16, because they were going to be taken into captivity, he says, I will be a sanctuary unto you. In other words, I will go there to tabernacle among you since you can't come here, right? So there were periods of time based on the circumstance where God said, understood, you can't go to this place of worship, but I will come to where you are. But under normal circumstances, we understand that the people will come and meet where God is. So God had this thing established. And I will say this last thing before I let you go, against, I know you probably want to respond to some of the stuff I said or just have something more to say, is that when you look at the New Testament and what they established, I'm going to read this in the book of Acts. Book of Acts, chapter 2. And it's talking about when the people were brought in. And verse 42, let me start in verse 41. Then they that gladly received his word were baptized. And the same day there were added unto them about 3,000 souls. I want us to keep that in mind. They were added unto them 3,000 souls. And they continued steadfastly in the apostles' doctrine and fellowship, breaking bread and in prayers. So when you look at this, they were baptized, but they, to continue in the doctrine, they had to continue in the fellowship, right? And so they would congregate together. Then it drops down and it says, verse 46, and they continuing daily with one accord in the temple and breaking bread from house to house, they eat their food with gladness and singleness of heart, praising God and having favor with all people. And the Lord added unto the church daily such as should be saved. So notice when the people would come in and they would receive these truths, how they would congregate together in this fellowship. And so that's something that's consistent throughout the word of God. So this whole thought of, well, I'm going to, cease and desist from fellowshipping with the saints and having communion with them. Now I'm going to worship them, and that everybody should daily worship on their own, because this is a personal relationship that we have with Christ. But we understand the importance of, and God stresses the importance in his word of coming together as a body of people, like-minded people, to worship God in singleness of heart.
One thing that we can't underemphasize or emphasize enough even is the spiritual connotation around it. You talked about getting away from the pack. There are very few people, I think, that are probably strong enough spiritually to be able to be like a Navy SEALs type of person. Like you just drop them behind the enemy lines and they are strong enough to be able to withstand. You come back and check on them, a year later, 2 years later, 3, and they still survive and so forth. Thing of it is, we may feel that we're that type of person, but I think those type of persons aren't those, but they come just from circumstances. It's like you don't anticipate and go and set out for it, because there's privilege and value in fellowship. When you're just solely in a digital space, whether it's media, you're listening and so forth, that level of accountability is not there. Particularly, again, if it's one thing if you are maybe sick or whatever the case may be, and people know that you're there, they're like, okay, well, we know that Susie is there and so forth, and you're still reaching out. You just, for whatever reason, you can't make it out in person, that's one thing. But if I'm just one of the many as such that just happens to tune in, and again, there's no accountability. Some people are like, okay, well, I just watch church every week. Just watching on TV, so forth, and that's their experience, and I think it's good. I mean, if you're doing that, I commend you for doing that. But the downside of it is, what happens when you don't watch for those few weeks? The person, the televangelist or whoever they are, they don't know that you're not watching. They don't know that you're not intended. They don't know that you're not involved, anything like that. And so it's just, you fall off. There's nobody that's there. Whereas when you have that fellowship that's there, and they say, okay, well, hey, Susan hadn't been here in a couple of weeks. Let me follow. Let me check and see what's going on. That's an opportunity that's there of just being able to look and to see. So we want to definitely reach toward what God would have for us. And when I've shared, again, in my experience, I don't want people to misunderstand, when you're looking for a church, you want to find one that's Bible-based. That and it's not based off of our own idiosyncrasies and so forth. You mentioned sometimes, hey, people can get upset and they're like, well, I'm leaving this church because they, somebody treated me bad. That's not that. We should treat more highly than we do the value of church fellowship. Some people just take it as just, it's just loosey-goosey type of situation, but we ought to value it for really what it is. It's a privilege that's being conferred upon us. And so we ought to take it seriously. And then evaluating and choosing a church, then we ought to look to find a church then that upholds the Bible, that's going to lift up Jesus Christ, that's going to stand upon the principles of his word. And if you are in a situation where maybe you're looking around and you don't seem to see that, you still have to avoid the extreme of just, well, I want to just lock in. We'll try to find as best a situation as possible. And that's the steps that we sought to carry you through. Because if you don't, then that is that danger, just being cut off and to yourself, that can spell trouble. And we want to certainly avoid that, because the devil is plotting every single day to try to figure out a way to be able to come in and to lead us astray. Other piece as well, when we talk about the fellowship of church organization and the structured church organization, is not something that goes away. God knew that we would come into the time period that we're in, and even to the very end, he has indicated that he knows those things through his foreknowledge. And yet in it still, there is still the system of organization. When you look at the gifts that God established in the church in the book of 1 Corinthians, as well as in Ephesians, he talks about putting them there and that they would remain until the end. So will the church go through the troubles of the last days? Yes. But will the church still be organized? And you mentioned, again, we're not talking about a building as such, but the body of believers that's been called out. Will they still be organized and united? Yes. And so we see that that's important for God, the structure that is there, that it may change in terms of some of the external pieces of it, but there's still that bonding together, there's still pressing together that is so important for each one of us to be able to have in the days in which we live, but also in the days in which we anticipate coming in the very future. So we're not to isolate ourselves. And there's some people who even look at the church and they say, well, church is so corrupt and so forth. I don't want to be a part of any organization. All organizations are man-made and that's bad, and I don't want to be a part of it. Yes, there are evils that unfortunately will arise. And when those evils arise, then we must resist those evils and speak to it as such. But notwithstanding the evils that arise, again, the order of organization is something that is created by God. 1 Corinthians chapter 14, let everything be done decently and in order. You know, the God is he is not the author of confusion, but of peace. So he brings order. Why? Because it's replicating the order that exists in heaven, and all things that are associated with God. It's not done haphazardly. It's done with the plan, with a purpose, and with a means. When we look at ourselves as believers, you know, separately, we can do great things, but really by ourselves, is little that we can do. But when we come together, there's much strength that can be achieved and many great things done for the kingdom of God.
Yeah, there's a couple of things in there. The dangers of, just being by yourself. And even if, because we understand the concept of churches where Jesus said, where two or three are gathered in my name, there am I in the midst. So we understand that. But Jesus wasn't, when he said that, he still went to the temple to worship. So he wasn't using that as some type of scapegoat to say, hey, don't go here. You're cool just being by yourself. And one of the things about it is, in the multitude of counselors there is safety, and God puts certain gifts in the church, and you by yourself, you don't get all the gifts. He spread them out, right? So you're not going to be in possession of all the gifts. So he said the church should lack in no good thing, because God has provided everything corporately to it. But however, if you separate the eyes from the mouth, from the ears, from the hands and the feet, and you put them in different places and they don't come together, well, you don't have a complete body, right? And that's the point that Paul was making. And so one of the things about when you're by yourself, how you're going to be edified, uplifted, and strengthened by the different gifts coming together, like Voltron. They would be good by themselves, but sometimes they need to form like Voltron to be able to win that battle, right? And so the church needs to come together with all of these gifts if they want to accomplish the mission that God has called them to accomplish. And so when you're in your home and you're trying to read and understand something, I know there's different people that I can go to get counsel, to ask questions, say, hey, help me to understand this. I know some people use me for that as well. And also for the sake of, and you brought this out, for accountability. A lot of times a lot of people don't want to go to church because they don't want somebody holding them accountable for the way they may choose to live. So I'm over here doing this and doing that. But if I'm just, online or watching, and these are good avenues to spread the gospel. The church is always taking advantage of these sources, whether it started with uh, the press, putting out newsletters, newspapers, and so forth. When it came to radio, then when it came to television, and now the internet, the church was not lagging behind on these things. As soon as these things became available, they always used these things to share the gospel. So the church was never behind in these things. However, those are good sources to reach people with the gospel, but those things never, even when they had radio, people like, well, you don't need to come to church. We have radio, ministry now. Oh, you need to come to church because we have television ministry. You had the Breath of Life, Amazing Facts, all these different programs that were out there on the television, but we never used that to say, hey, you don't need to come to church now. So now that you have the World Wide Web, all of a sudden, certain people are coming with this thought of, well, you can just sit in your home, and watch us online. No, there's always a fellowship that's around that you can find if you're not being nitpicky. People will always try to find something to nitpick at as an excuse not to be in the body of believers. However, I will say this. This is the point I was making, was that people don't want to be held accountable. Remember when Jesus was talking about if a brother offends you, right? And you can't work that out between you and that brother, then you go and you grab an elder, right? And you bring him, and then you try to work that issue out. If you can't, what do you say next? Bring it to the church. So now you're taking it to a larger body of people, and then the church will make a decision about what to do in that situation. Paul talked about this as well in 1 Corinthians chapter 5. We said, I heard that there's commonly fornication that is among you, and not so much as it's named among the Gentiles. And he said, now when you come together to meet, so they're not sitting in their homes. He said, when you come together to meet, hey, we need to deal with that situation and figure out what we're going to do with these individuals that are doing these gross sins. Right now, if you're sitting by yourself watching through the internet or watching on TV, nobody can hold you personally accountable. So you can live how you want to live, claim what you want to claim, and nobody can do anything because, like you said, the people that's holding these services, they don't know that you're out there watching. They don't know. We don't know who watch our videos, right? People may watch. We don't know. And I know this. Some of y'all that subscribe don't be watching all these videos. Mm-hmm. So I would say this, and like you said, God gave different things to the church to edify us and build us up and to prepare us just to meet life's challenges. And so we don't want to try to sit on the island alone. And also for ministry. And I know we out of time now, but let me say this last thing. Ministry, how are you going to because the church ultimately has a mission and has a plan that it has to accomplish. And everybody has, everybody's not going to be the pastor, the prophet, the this or the that, but everybody has a role that they play, and that role is important. And if you're sitting at home by yourself, even if it's just me and my family, we can't fulfill that true mission of coming together in organization, having a strategic plan to go out and spread the gospel through various different means. And so that's another reason why coming and fellowshipping together is so important. There's many other reasons, but we're just out of time. We're gonna have to pick this up on another episode.
Yeah. We will. Let me throw this in there before we get to the next one. One of the other things too is it can minimize the false doctrines that people believe. We have seen so many different things of people coming up with crazy ideas, and when you're kind of by yourself or just with a couple of people, it's easy to get engrossed in that and really believe, oh, I got something. I found something. This is like new light, new information is what God revealed. But when you're in a bigger body, then they're able to be able to look and say, you know what, man, you tripping. That ain't
we've had to do that.
That's a part of the accountability there. But you start going off on a tangent on different things, and there are dangers there. So I'll say that and just turn it back over to you.
Hey, you might as well close it out. We're done.
All right. So we thank you for for again fellowshipping with us, spending this time together today. We pray that you've been blessed by what we've been able to share. We'll certainly pick up in the future time. Until the next time, remember to keep your heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life.